Hello, everybody at WonderCon. My name is Anthony Rapp. I played Commander Paul Stamets on Star Trek Discovery. I'm an actor. I'm also a science enthusiast. I've become more of a science enthusiast since becoming Paul Stamets, who's based on a real scientist, but that's more later. But welcome to our panel on the science of smart TV. It's pretty clear that you don't have to be a genius to make a good TV show, certainly not a scientific genius. But for some shows, you might need to have one on staff. Please welcome to our panel, David Saltzberg, who is the technical advisor for Young Sheldon and a UCLA professor, and we'll find out more details about what kind of UCLA professor in a minute. Rhett Allain, technical consultant for MacGyver and associate professor of physics at Southeastern Louisiana University, and Dr. Erin MacDonald, astrophysicist and technical consultant for the Star Trek universe. Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Hello, happy to be here.
Hi, thank you.
So I'm going to go back in the same order. David, you are located in Los Angeles?
That's right. I'm here in Los Angeles. I work at UCLA.
And what do you do? What do you teach at UCLA? If we're going to take one of your courses, what are we going to learn?
Oh, so you might see me at any course. So I teach the introductory physics to scientists and engineers, from F equals MA to Faraday's law. I teach an upper division undergraduate class. Right now it's electronics for physicists, and we're doing that remotely, which is kind of fun, trying to debug people's circuits over video. Or you might see me in a graduate class where I teach more likely my specialty, which would be experimental particles.
Experimental particles.
Right.
Is that what you just said?
Experimental particle physics. So atom smashers, like the Large Hadron Collider.
Cool. So do you work with like the hyper accelerating, what are they called? The thing in Pasadena where they accelerate molecules and all. Isn't that in Pasadena?
There's a big accelerator in Geneva, Switzerland, called CERN, and the name of the big ring is called the Large Hadron Collider.
So you're interested in that sort of
smasher out there, and
that's one of the things like you would be like, ooh, that's cool.
Yeah,
what they're doing. Cool. Okay, cool. And Rhett, you are in what part of Louisiana? Is Southeastern Louisiana?
It's Hammond, Louisiana. It's just across the lake from New Orleans, which is really nice because it's easy to get down to New Orleans. There's nothing really in between me and the city except for water and a bridge. So that's pretty nice.
And do you specialize in the physics of water and the physics of weather at all? Or is that just happens to be where you are?
Yeah, that's just where I am. So I specialize in, I did my graduate degree in physics education, which explores how students understand different topics in physics. Actually, before that, I did my master's degree work in also experimental high energy physics at CERN. So.
Oh, all right, cool. And Erin, you are where?
Yes, I'm in LA.
Yeah.
Yep. And I used to be in academia. I did my PhD and some postdoc research in gravitational waves with the LIGO collaboration. I lived in the UK while I was doing that. And then I started working in aerospace engineering, moved to Los Angeles, and started working as a science consultant for the Star Trek franchise, which now consumes my full-time job. So I'm also writing as well, which is fabulous.
Very cool. Well, I think that nicely segues me into the question that becomes about the bridge between science and TV. So were you three, any of you three, and please feel free to, be the one to chime in at any point. Were you yourselves viewers of television shows in general? And if so, were there particular shows that caught your eye? And were there shows that dealt with science that you were like, they need better?
I'm deeply obsessive, love television, was always a big fan, always wanted to move into the entertainment industry. I mean, I grew up on sitcoms and I was a PBS kid. I got my Nick at Night time and PBS. That was like what I watched. But the one thing that I was deeply obsessed with that then influenced my career was the X-Files. So having, as growing up in the 90s, little redheaded kid watching Dana Scully fight aliens with science, I was like, she's who I want to be. So basically that dictated the next 15 years of my life.
That's interesting. Cool. How about you, Rhett?
I mean, in the early 80s, I of course watched TV. At that time, you watch whatever your parents watch. I mean, we were captivated by time, right? There was no choosing what to watch. This is what's on TV and this is what my parents are watching. So that's what I'm going to watch. So if it was sports, if it was golf, then I would just go find something else to do. But the shows that I remember, I for some reason, $6 Million Man sticks in my mind, which I actually did go back and rewatch that a while ago. Someone posted something on Twitter, and I wanted to rewatch it, and they're available. So it wasn't too bad. I mean, it's definitely has a lot of the same elements that we put in more modern shows. It's a little bit slower, and the hairstyles are different, and the bell-bottom pants. But for me, the $6 Million Man was really important because also they had like the $6 Million Man toys and stuff. So I had the toys too, and that really sticks in my mind. And then the other one that sticks in my mind is Battlestar Galactica, the original one, which actually is not very good. But it had a huge impact on me because it was, I like Star Wars, I like Star Trek, but they're really Star Trek was on reruns already for the original series, and we never watched it. And Star Wars, there was no show. So if you didn't go to the movie, you didn't get to see it. So I was a big space fan. But
cool. And David, how about you?
Yeah, so just like Erin, I watched a lot of sitcoms too, and my parents thought I was wasting my time, but look how useful it turned out to be. I've also gone back and watched old sitcoms, old television shows like Rhett did, and what struck me was how empty the sets were, given how much time we spend putting things on the sets because people have high definition televisions. If you look back at those old ones, they're pretty empty. And in science shows, of course, I love Nova and those sort of PBS shows like Erin. But I shouldn't even say it. I like the shows that got the science a little wrong too. My friends and I used to like to make fun of the crazy words that they would use. Something was so many hectares off the bow of the ship. So
that would never be a unit of measurement used at sea. Is that what you mean? Like that's
it's a measurement of hectares is a measurement of area, and you wouldn't talk about distance that way. Right. So I shouldn't say it, but maybe there was some value in not getting the science completely right.
I'd like to add that bad science doesn't really bother me. I mean, inconsistent plot holes bothers me, right? But Star Wars is a great example. There's no science in Star Wars. I mean, not really. I mean, it's not really even a science fiction. But I love it, and I'm okay that it's not perfect. I'm not going to be, I got to walk out of this movie because the science is so bad. The science is just there to support the story, and if it's not perfect, I'm okay with that. That's why I watch those movies. That's why I love superheroes. Right? They're not realistic, and that's why I like it.
Yeah. So, what drew you to being a scientist yourself? Like, what were the key? If you can look back, were there key moments you're like, not only am I sort of interested in this, but I actually want to pursue it. And I feel like I'm at home pursuing it. Anybody want to take that one?
I mean, for me, it's amazing how much a fictional character can influence your life, because it was just finding out that Dana Scully did her undergraduate degree in astrophysics. And I went, well, that sounds kind of cool. And you mean I can just study space for, go study that in college? And so there was just that direct line of, I think they call it the Scully effect now, of me just realizing that could be, but I didn't go into, that's why I like to hear kind of these other guys, because I didn't go into science with that wanting to be my career. I thought it was interesting. I loved the idea that I could go to college and study space. And then I didn't really have a plan beyond that.
I want to go back to, you said the Scully effect, like that's something that they've tracked, like an entry of women into the scientific field directly.
Yeah, this was a study commissioned by the Gina Davis Institute for Gender and Media, and they did a sociological study on women around my age, and realized that if you watched the X-Files as a kid, as a woman, you are statistically significantly more likely to end up being a scientist than women who didn't watch the X-Files growing up. So they call it the Scully effect. And
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool, because I know that we in the arts, we like to believe that we have an impact. We hope we do. We hope we have a positive impact, but to see that there's actual corollary data that in fact says, yes, that did happen. That's pretty cool.
It is. It's really cool.
Yes. Rhett or David, where are your gateways?
I would like to add that impact thing, because I mean, not just on me, but on the whole field of science, Star Trek in particular. I mean, look how old it is, and how they name things in science after Star Trek. And then there's kind of like a circular impact of things that have ideas. Star Trek's based on science, which influences new science. And it's a crazy thing. Star Trek is so important kind of in our innovation of science. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, I've met NASA scientists who said the same thing. Like they became NASA scientists because of watching Star Trek. It's pretty amazing to be a part of something that has that legacy.
Even things like the tricorder, we're going to make a tricorder, and in Star Trek, they made this device that didn't really mean anything, but then they made it. Like, we're going to make a tricorder because it was in Star Trek. So,
yeah.
but
I'm into that.
But I got into science probably mostly just, I like to build things. I made models as a kid and did a lot of building things, remote control cars. You had to build your remote control car back then. You couldn't buy them. So I really liked building things and making circuits and stuff like that. So then when I got to college, the university I went to didn't have an engineering program. So I just did physics. And then here I am. So,
and I always hear like the phrase physics and engineering feels like they're very like they're said together a lot as one thing, physics and engineering. Is that accurate as a non-physics or engineering person?
I don't think physicists would agree, and engineers probably not either. I mean, we do a lot of the same things, we still build stuff, but engineering is more how do we apply these particular principles, whereas physics would be let's find some new models of nature. Let's do gravitational waves, and then later, 50 years from now, there'll be a gravitational wave generator or something like that the
engineer will implement. So they're
right.
very. I guess it's more like that. They're not together like the same thing, but they're like.
Yeah. Okay. That's
yeah.
Dealing with the same ideas, just from different ways.
Got it.
And
Depends on the individual. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, even within physics, you get that whole spectrum of like theoretical physics to applied physics, and then engineering kind of ties off of that. And so for me, working in gravitational waves, at the time, it was theoretical physics. So I was purely in the math and numbers and all of that. And then pivoting to engineering, it wasn't a direct sort of comparison of careers and skill sets. It was more of just like how I approach problems that became applicable. But there's like this whole spectrum of like, here's the math world, and then here's the engineering world, way over there.
Cool. How about for you, David?
Well, by the way, we have, just to underscore, at UCLA, we have some people that would be squarely in physics and some people would be squarely in engineering. But we have people with joint appointments between two departments. So it really depends on the individual and where their interests lie. So it's a spectrum, again, to use that word. I mean, to go back to my origins, a little different. I grew up around it. My dad was an engineer, and so I grew up talking science. We lived in an area that a lot of people's parents were in science and engineering. And so I had a very good friend whose parents brought home really dangerous chemicals for us to play with. So that was really nice. But, it's not necessarily, I mean, so I just came at it that way.
People feel like we need to have a disclaimer. Don't encourage people to bring dangerous chemicals to their children.
But I don't want anyone to be discouraged just that if they didn't grow up around it. We welcome first generation students who do really well, and please come along for the ride.
Yeah, cool. So from this science background, I mean, Erin, you've sort of touched on a little bit by your love of X-Files being such a gateway for you, but did you ever imagine yourself like, okay, I'm doing this science thing, I'm doing my teaching thing, and I'm deeply immersed in science, I'm gonna work on a TV show? Where did that thing happen for you, and what was that process?
Very much for me, a forced situation that I was like, this is what I want to do, because like I said, I left academia. I left the research community. It wasn't the type of career that I was interested in doing, but I loved the teaching. And like you, David, I taught a lot of introductory physics and astronomy classes, and that was a huge passion of mine. And so I really missed teaching. And I actually started teaching at conventions like this one. And I started giving talks on the science behind science fiction and using science fiction to teach science. We were kind of laughing a little bit earlier that even the bad science, you can still teach something and still explain why it's wrong and why the scientists in the room are laughing. And so I really liked using science fiction as a teaching tool. And then through those talks started to get really popular, and I was spending good portions of my summer just going to sci-fi conventions, and I'd see the same people from the creative industry who were at those, and then we just tagged up. And then being in LA, then it all just starts to go from there. But I was always like, I love this idea of being able to apply the science to the science fiction. Yeah.
And what has this been a sort of more recent phenomenon that consultants are being hired and used in writers' rooms and with producers to make sure that these things are more grounded? Because do you think that there was a science consultant on $6 Million Man?
I mean, I know that Star Trek has it. They in the 80s and 90s, they had a few science consultants who have gone on, in the entertainment industry, Andre Bermanis and Naren Shakar. And so some shows have, but I mean, I think the multitude of content out there, one of the ways to stand out is to have really good science on it. So.
And for you, Rhett, did you approach them, or did they approach you, or had you done it before? Were you like, oh, I think I want to fix stuff, or how did that happen for you?
Well, no, my original plan was to be a space cowboy, and that fell through. So then I went into academics, and then I just landed luckily into working with stuff. I started writing blogs in 2009 to analyze things that I love a lot, and one of the things I loved at the time was Mythbusters. And so, and at some point, Mythbusters kind of switched. And the great thing about Mythbusters I loved was that Adam and Jamie were just normal guys. And they weren't really, and I like Bill Nye, the science guy too, but, that I think Adam and Jamie had this kind of approach that, they can do it, I can do it. And it's just like normal things that normal people do. But when they put in like science explanations in like more of an authoritarian viewpoint, like this is the way the science of that. And then I kind of wrote about that saying, well, you got to really be careful, because once you switch from the voice of Adam and Jamie from regular guys to, kind of a teaching moment, that you got to be more careful. So I'd write about the things that they had to be more careful about. And then they contacted me. So I worked on Mythbusters for the last 5 seasons. I did Mythbusters Junior. I did the Brian and John Mythbusters too. And then when MacGyver started, then they found me through Mythbusters, and they said, hey, would you like to work on MacGyver? And I'm like, heck yeah, I want to do that. So
yeah. And with MacGyver, is your brief that you have to make sure that whatever they say that we want to try to do, you have to ensure that it is feasible? Or is it just that they bounce ideas off, they ask you questions? Is it a mixture of both kind of thing?
Well, I mean, there's no rules that it has to be perfect, right? I mean, it's still, MacGyver's science fiction. So, but they care to make things at least plausible and not just complete fantasy. So if possible, we would like things to be at least based on some element of truth. But really, I'm just there as a checker and an idea guy. I don't have to, they can do whatever they want. I'm more of a resource for them that they can use to help come up with new ideas and check ideas and see how they would build that and work on the dialogue and equations and stuff like that.
Cool. And how about for you, David? How did you come to Young Sheldon?
Well, so this was interesting that I was living in Los Angeles, right, which is where the industry is. So like Erin, and I'm just a professor at UCLA teaching physics. I had no connection to the entertainment industry except living in Los Angeles. If you go to your neighbor's party, 95% of the people there are all in the industry, and it all seemed a little strange to me. But I figured, okay, I was never going to be involved in that. And then one day it was a friend of a friend of a friend of the executive producer for Big Bang Theory. They had some questions about a set, and my friend was like, can you just help them out with whatever silly question they have? And one thing led to another, and 12 years later, we had done 12 years of the Big Bang Theory, which was amazing. And they had kept me so close in so many aspects of the storytelling and the creation of the program. And then the spinoff from that was the prequel, Young Sheldon, of which we're now in the 4th season. It's on. It's a very sweet show. Yeah, learning a lot about the character that you might not have seen before. So that's how it happened to me. I just kind of fell into it.
And have you been surprised, any of you, by are there any similarities between the way showbiz works and the way the scientific community works at all, or is it very, very different? I'm curious about that.
I'll just say again that this was an amazingly true how parallel they are. So when we do big experiments, there's often a principal investigator, someone with the clear vision of the science that they want to do, which very much I think would be like the showrunner or the creative head of the show. And then there's there's a hierarchy of creative people, and there's another aspect, which is the people that make sure everything actually happens, that make sure things get built, make sure they don't fall down, make sure, really, to just the day by day of the really hard work of putting on a show or putting on an experiment. It was really interesting how that organizational structure carries over between, say, a project manager of a science experiment and a principal investigator carries over into the Hollywood sphere.
Is there any is there any corollary of actors in your world of science? What would that be? I wonder. Do you ever feel like you have to give a?
I think the actors would be the experiments themselves. That's when you let it free. And whatever you get back, it's like, well, thanks physics. Thanks actors. That was great. Good job.
Yeah.
I love
Have you had actors call you up or email you or either directly or through the writers saying like, why are you making me say these words?
I'm still waiting for your call. And you haven't called me yet, so I feel pretty good about
it. I Google and I look up the words and they like, it makes sense. I feel like I feel helped by the fact that even if it is theoretical or stretched to a sort of fantastical idea, that it's grounded in something real that I can refer to that gives me a grounding. I don't have to know all the ins and outs of what it means. I don't really have to know all about dark matter, but enough that if I talk about dark matter, I feel like I have a grounding in it. So I'm not.
But then you're all set because no one really understands dark matter anyway. So
it was really a lot of fun. I recently spent an hour on the phone explaining quantum chromodynamics to Wally Shawn. And he got it all. So it was great. I was ready to hire him.
That's cool. Did you say quantum what to him?
Quantum chromodynamics. It's the forces inside the nucleus of an atom.
Yeah.
Chromo is color. Now we're talking about that as well, if you like.
Yeah.
That's a whole other panel, quantum chromodynamics.
But he got it all, and it was great.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for us as cast members of Star Trek. I know that like when Wilson has his medical jargon, and when any of us have any of our physics, that knowing that we can look online or get an email or something, that it's just helpful. Apparently there have been shows in the past where they literally just made up words and word salad and didn't have anything. So then I would think if that were the case with us, it would be like very discombobulating. So I imagine for your shows and et cetera, that it's similar to us, that it's helpful knowing that it's real. With Young Sheldon, do you feel like you have to think about from a younger perspective, or because he's a genius that doesn't quite enter into it as much? Do you know what I mean?
It matters that he's younger, and also the sequence of how his development would go along. What would he be learning in what order is something we think about. In our case, these are sort of memories. This is something that took place 30 years ago, so it doesn't have to be exact structure like we did in Big Bang Theory, where everything made absolute linear sense. Whereas the idea here is that he might be learning about quantum chromodynamics, but we don't really know how much he understood or not at that time.
Do you find that are you getting feedback that these seeds that you're planting through your consulting is actually leading to future Scullys or future Sheldons or future MacGyvers? Or do you get any read on that at all from your perspective? Can you tell?
That's it. I mean, I see, at least because I came into this industry from the fan-facing side of doing the conventions. I mean, that's where the creative side gets that feedback, where you do get people coming up to say what an impact these shows have. So, on a regular basis, I'd be interacting with fans, and I see that impact, even if it's not directly, it's something that I've had an influence in, but like certainly being surrounded by people who, and myself included, whose lives have been changed by these franchises. It is powerful. And that's kind of the stuff that keeps you up at night and also like is exhilarating and reminds you that it's so amazing what we do, that it does have an impact.
When you say keeps you up at night because you want to get it right, or?
Yeah. I don't want to screw it up. Yeah. It's a legacy,
I think for MacGyver, it's kind of like the other way. I mean, I think a lot of the ideas, at least that I use in MacGyver come from people, right? From real people especially with YouTube, people that make such incredible things online. And then, you kind of take that idea and use it in a show. MacGyver is kind of a representation of those people that just go out there and do stuff. And there's so many great examples out there. So many people online that are just, and fascinated with the stuff they make. And so MacGyver is inspired by the normal people.
Do you know in MacGyver's case, do the props departments try to make things as practical as possible also, or are they still relying a fair amount on visual effects?
Visual. It's mostly visual, and they'll send me stuff. I do I work with the prop people sometimes too. I mostly work with the writers, but when they have a prop that they want to check with me or stuff like that, and I try to include as many pictures as I can when we're talking about some particular MacGyver moment, so that they can use that when they go on. But yeah, I think for the most part it's visual, but I'm not completely sure.
Do you peruse the TikToks of people doing elaborate like obstacle course one shots of like this thing, like the
Rube Goldberg?
Yeah, Rube Goldberg kind of things that they do with people and rocks and bottles and balls and like that are all one shot. Is that ever a thing that you guys look at and you're like, that's not visual effects? We can do that in our show. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
You guys as scientists, are you like, ooh, or is it like, who cares?
No, those are art. That's not science. It's a combination of art and science for me. With those kind of things, those are so artistic, based on science, and that's what makes them so great. I love those kind of things.
Cool. Well, I do too. So that makes me feel.
There was an episode on Big Bang Theory where they did one.
Where they created one.
Right.
Yeah. And again, was it the props department? Did they actually create a real? Because that's sitcom. They don't have the.
It was all real. Yeah, it was all real. And
yeah.
I think a lot of production assistants spent a lot of time stacking things in place.
And do you know how many takes they had to do to make it?
I don't remember at this point. Sorry.
All right. That's all right. And so you mentioned this a little bit earlier with regard to MacGyver, but is there a ratio of like the times that you present notions or ideas to the writers and the times that the writers come to you and for answers or validation or direction? Is it really back and forth or sort of a little bit more one way than the other?
I mean, at the beginning, it was just them. They would write scripts, and I would just look at them. That first season, I was just, a final component. But as I started to get to know more of the writers, they would contact me as they're writing. Some of them, they would call me sometimes, and I'm in Louisiana, so it's different time zone. It's always, I'm at a soccer game or something like that, and they're calling me, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to answer the phone. But yeah, it's pretty much back and forth. They come up with some great ideas. The writers are really so creative. And sometimes they'll just say, hey, he's in a situation that he needs to do this particular thing. Do you have any ideas? And I just want to give them some options. 2 or 3 options, and then they can go with whichever one works best for that particular episode. So it's teamwork.
How about for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Rhett touched on is really important, that it's about these relationships and these trusts that you build as you go. And when I've started on jobs where it's like a friend of a friend recommended me, then it very much is like, here, just look at our scripts and see if you have any notes. And what they want to make sure is that I'm not going to rain on their parade. And I think that's where probably everyone here on the panel has been successful. The way I like to call it, because I also came from, a bit of a performing arts background, is we're going to yes and what you give us. Like, I'm not going to turn around and stomp on it because it's about the story. And I'm here to just put that little extra sprinkles on and make sure we're not saying anything wrong. And then as you build that trust and they realize that I'm there to be a positive energy in the room and to try to bring in just some interesting things that they can use, then we start getting more involved in the creative process and and then all the way through and getting in touch with the post-production department. And so these relationships grow, but it usually, as Rhett said, it kind of takes a season to build in that trust and that relationship. And then you're one of the crowd.
Cool. Would you say it's the same thing for you?
What Erin and Rhett said, I agree with so much, like my own experience too. And that's why I found that movies were less satisfying, because you never get that second or third time around where people know how to work with you. It's sort of over by the time they understand what you can bring. Yeah, there was one moment where so we're not the science police, right? But there was one moment I felt really terrible. Like I kind of had to say no, and I said, I'm really sorry about this. They had Sheldon and his friend's mother working on quantum brain dynamic theory, the idea that consciousness comes out of quantum mechanics. And I was like, this is not really the most well-received theory. And it worked perfectly with the 2 characters that they'd be working on that. So I felt really bad. And then the next version of the script I saw had them working on disproving quantum brain dynamic theory. So they solved it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is have you had moments you have had to go like, like, really, no, guys, no, please, no?
The way I've handled those is to err on the side of not explaining it. And I think sometimes it can come from anything, right? Because there's so many people at play here. It goes beyond the writers to the showrunners to the executives and all of that, that there's all this push of visions. And so sometimes when the vision gets a little bit out of control and the science is starting to get a little bit not right, then where my note will come and be like, okay, if this is the direction we want to go, then let's just not explain it. Let's just cut off this dialogue right here. And we'll just leave it, because as soon as you start to explain it, people are going to be like, well, but wait, what about, and let's just let it be. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's the Star Wars midi-chlorians problem.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. When they explain, yes, I see what you mean. I know things are theoretical, but time travel certainly enters into Star Trek. I don't think it enters into MacGyver.
He had a flashback where he went to see Tesla, but it was mostly in his mind. So
yeah. But so is time travel a real theoretical exploratory avenue that physicists are looking at?
Well, it's funny because, like, again, with my background, which is in general relativity, so it's really about how space and time are intertwined. You know, the reason we can't time travel really lies in the mathematics, that it's a constant, that like there's no variable in front of time that you can start playing with. And so the way that we perceive our universe is this, equation that time progresses at a fixed rate that we cannot mess around with. That's sort of what unfortunately makes time travel not possible. But there are ways we can play with it. And I've given plenty of talks on like how we can make time travel work. One of my favorite ways to do this is a wormhole, because you're connecting 2 points in space and time and tunneling through that. And so that kind of works.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. What about time dilation?
Time dilation does, absolutely. And that's what I love, seeing that crop up and be used to great effect. And I think that's what they did at the opening of season 3 was, that was part of the explanation for the delay between Burnham and the crew getting there. And so time dilation is caused by gravitational wells, where the people who are deeper in this gravity well are going to be experiencing time slower than the people who are outside. And we've seen that in Interstellar. We've seen that in other decades ago Star Trek episodes. And that is, the thing is that time is still progressing. And this is the whole relativity concept, is that for your math environment, time is still progressing in a way you can't control it, but relative to the environment of someone else, time is progressing in the same way that they can't control. It's just combining those, they're slightly offset. So again, we can't control it, but you can experience time differently. And that is true and mind-blowing. We use that for GPS satellites. GPS satellites experience time faster than we do, which is awesome.
Why?
Because they're further outside of Earth's gravity well. Now it's like fractions of nanoseconds, but with GPS, we have to be really, really precise on the timing. And so we account for the fact that they are fractions of nanoseconds experiencing time slightly faster than we are. That makes a difference between if I'm here or I'm on the other side of the street. So we do that's a practical application of time dilation we have every day.
And we need to do that because we need to track down bad guys through GPS satellites.
For a lot of the GPS applications, you're going to want to be very accurate. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Yes, that's cool. Now with Young Sheldon, what era is he? He's living 30 years ago?
It's about 1990. Yep.
Is it weird for you to go back and like do science that predates all the breakthroughs that have happened in the last 30 years?
So some of the challenges were, if they have a periodic table on the wall, which elements should we cover over with a piece of paper?
Because it's how many elements have been added in the last 30 years? Like a number, right?
Yeah. I have to look at the, something like a dozen, or they weren't named yet, or something. So I learned that eBay is a really great place to get first editions of books. Turns out my own personal library goes back to college in that era. So, and I just keep an eye out for those kinds of things. It's been nice because after 12 years of Big Bang Theory, we used a lot of ideas, and being able to go backwards to 1990 means there's a whole different set of circumstances. For example, we mentioned the superconducting super collider, which was huge back then and actually in Texas. So we were able to connect that to the story. and they're going to be working on a solar neutrino detector, which were being built right around that time. And so it just gives your creativity a different environment to draw from.
And what was when was the first Mars rover? Was it around that time? No.
Is this a quiz?
I don't know. You guys are the scientists. Never mind. I'm as a
90s, right?
It's been incredibly exciting to watch Perseverance, right? Yes. Now I'm thinking about, okay, when was that seen as like just a pie in the sky dream? When was it made real? And now here we are again with this new breakthrough. But yeah, if you were doing a story about, astrophysicists thinking about that, it would be hard, it would seem to me, to divorce your knowledge of what is possible and what came of it if you were going to write about it at a time when they didn't know that they could do all those things.
Another thing to be careful about, I consulted on a wonderful show that not too many people saw called Manhattan, which was a fictionalized account of the Manhattan Project. And I hadn't even thought about it, the fact that some words that we use didn't exist then, like black hole. And once someone pointed out to me I remembered to go look for that, but I didn't even think about the fact. And in that case, Google Ngram is your fan, because it gives you the frequency of usage of words versus year. And so you can tell when someone started using a word.
Yeah.
Well, so like, yeah, for something like black hole, but this is before
like John Wheeler, I believe, in the 60s.
Yeah.
In the 60s. How can you trace the beginnings of these terms before we had the internet, and how did they spread around the scientific community, and how did
Google Ngram has the frequency of the word in books and magazines, and so you can see if it's 0 or non-zero.
Well, and my friend, Professor Mohammed Noor, who's also done some occasional consulting for Discovery, he did a great thing because we've given these joint talks at conventions where he does the biology and I do the physics. He went through all of the Star Trek scripts over the years and pulled out all the times that they mentioned, I think it was like DNA, evolution, genetics, and you could see like how the genetics field was growing at the same time those words were being used in Star Trek scripts. And so there is kind of this interesting, I think Rhett mentioned at the beginning, it's like an interplay between the science and the science fiction. One influences the other constantly.
Sure. Which would make sense, because the preoccupations of the writers who are doubtless being informed by what they're reading and seeing and picking up in the journals and whatever they're looking at. Yeah.
People say science fiction is about our own time. No matter where it's placed, it's about us and now.
Yeah, of course.
And so what you're saying is consistent with that.
Is there anything that you could point to as like, this is one of the weirder, more like high concept things that I had to pitch to the writers that actually made it in the show, or like some like left field kind of like, let me talk to you about this, let me teach you that, and they were like, whoa, dude, I gotta put it in. Is there anything that comes to mind there? Like,
I had one this season that I was, we can't make the same MacGyver moment again, right? You don't want here did that, right? So we can't do the same thing because he would never be so unoriginal. And he needed to build a microphone, and I was trying to come up with a new way to get a microphone. And if you think about a microphone, a normal microphone is a magnet with a coil of wire. I mean, that's as basic as you can get. I said, I wonder if a cordless drill would work as a microphone.
I didn't know that. Sorry, I didn't know that.
Okay, well, yes, it's just a coil of wire and then a magnet, and then it moves when you speak to it, and it generates a current. And so I said, well,
all microphones are magnets. I'm sorry.
No, not all that way. That's a condenser. That you can use a capacitor or a carbon-based microphone. There's a whole bunch of different kind of microphones you could build, but that's the easiest one that you can build that one on your own. It's really easy. And that's one of the things I like to do after the episode, to show you, okay, this is how you could build it on your own, and show people how to do that. Cool. But I thought, hey, I wonder if a cordless drill would work. I mean, it would theoretically work. I don't know if it really worked, but let's just do that. And then after the episode, I tried it out and it worked. I'm like, well, it actually, I used a drill as a microphone. I didn't think that'd actually work, but it made it in. So
that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Do you feel not an obligation, but like it's fun for you to like then see if it does work, and then do you post that online? Do you like?
Yeah, I'll post on YouTube. Really excited. Like I said, I like building things from the very beginning, and the great thing about MacGyver builds is they don't require special equipment, because that's his whole thing, right? He just finds whatever he can get, so it's as simple as you can get, and I love that.
That's cool. Anything for you guys that jumps out as like one of the weirder or outlandish things you pitched that made it in?
Not weird. I mean, there's some stuff coming up that isn't out yet that I'm excited about, but one that ended up being really fun was we put a coronal mass ejection into season 3 of Discovery. And that was the first time that those had been used in Star Trek, because they'd had solar flares, but coronal mass ejections are like the uber version of those. And so we had this whole discussion about like what a CME is and what kind of damage it could do. And I, in fact, like on these sort of discussions, I was going through like my original notes, and we've got like star burp in there, which did make it into the dialogue. So that was just kind of like a personal achievement for me, that was one of the first ones that I had done for Star Trek that then made it into a plot back in the little junior Aaron days. So that was pretty fun. That one's always going to be close to my heart.
Starburp. Yep.
Yeah, Starburp.
Yep, I remember. Yep. How about for you, David?
Well, it's interesting. So we very rarely in this show start with the science and to build the story around it. Usually the writers come to me with a science-sized hole in the script, and how do we fill it? And just for one I really loved for Young Sheldon was, well, it's 1990. We want him to follow the Nobel Prize ceremony, but it's not broadcast on the internet in 1990. Certainly wasn't covered on television. What are you going to do? And we came up with the idea of shortwave radio, which then led to a lot of nice jokes and crawling around on the roof. And it's really fun that once you have one little idea, these creative people go off and add all this great stuff to it.
Does shortwave radio still exist? Are people still using it?
There's still ham radio people they're still exchanging, I think, postcards when they connect to one another. It's a little funny, but maybe one day if the internet all goes down, we'll be happy they're still around.
Yes. Cool. I'm looking at the clock. I want to make sure I get all the questions too. This is an interesting question. I'm wondering if it's sort of related to what we've been talking about. There's been some studies that show that the fans of these shows tend to be like especially interested in these sorts of topics, understandably. Do you ever hear from them, or do you peruse message boards or other internet means or at conventions or whatever, where through conversations or interactions with them, they actually seed little ideas that you then bring to the writers? Is there any sort of, that you can see links there at all?
I can't think of an example specifically that has made it all the way through that process, but certainly the talks that I give will be like the science of Star Trek Discovery, and we'll kind of hit the high points of, some of this. And then one of the things I like is when I'm giving talks on things in Star Trek, for example, that I didn't work on, where I then have to go back and kind of come up with a scientific explanation for. And then people coming up to me afterwards and saying like, well, I kind of thought of it like this, and neither of us are technically wrong, but it's interesting to hear other people's interpretation who, like you said, have a science background, or at least are science leaning, will have a slightly different perspective on it, because someone from a quantum particle physics background is going to see an explanation in Star Trek different than someone like me who's coming from a cosmology and general relativity background, because we just view the universe slightly differently. And so I always like hearing how people approach those problems, for sure.
Sure. I've got to meet an actual astromycologist. I was asked to speak at a little conference like a little over a year ago, and an actual astromycologist was there and introduced herself to me. I didn't even know that there really are astromycologists. Did you? Did you know that?
It's crazy. I love it. I think it's awesome.
My understanding was that she was pursuing that before Discovery, but they kind of like sort of then she was still coming up as Discovery was, being broadcast. So yeah, there's at least one of them out there somewhere.
That's awesome.
Have you ever had any kind of like suggestions that have made their way maybe through the filters of your brain into the show at all?
So, one of the things about MacGyver that's interesting is that since the original MacGyver, was fairly popular, everyone knows about it. The word MacGyver is already out there, right? Everyone uses it as a verb. I MacGyvered it. And so in this season, there was a great example of this we did a quarantine episode. So they were all quarantined. And one of MacGyver's thing was he was working on a respirator, cheap respirator. And so I found I found the UT Texas Austin, I think it was Austin project where they were building a respirator out of normal parts, and they said they MacGyvered it. And so I used their basic idea in the show, and I was really excited about that because MacGyver inspired them, and then they inspired MacGyver. So
that's cool. Did they? Do you know if they knew about it? If they came to know about it at all?
I don't know. I hope they watch the show.
Are you out there? Are you out there? Hello,
Yeah.
wonderful. Hello. How about for you, David?
Well, sometimes I get emails, and sometimes I get complaints. And I think one of my roles is just.
I don't believe you. I don't believe that ever
emails.
happened. What are you talking about? The internet complaining? What? Sorry. Yes.
I think maybe my most important role in the show is that the producers don't have to get the hate mail; they can send it. So for the most part, it's people didn't understand what we were thinking, and they were wrong about we were being wrong. So I think you could only be so correct before people start to think you're wrong incorrectly. But we did make a mistake, or I made a mistake, I should say. In operant conditioning, there's the concept of positive, negative feedback. It's not what you might think, and we got it backwards, and I felt really bad about that. And
you mean in how you included in the show? It was just
we had there's a classic way of getting it backwards, which I did, or I let through, or I did. And it's not what you don't know that gets you; it's what you don't know that you don't know.
Yes.
So that slipped by. I could have easily looked it up if I'd even thought I didn't know. And it's a common mistake. We did fix it several years later when we happened to go back to the same topic. We said it correctly.
Mm.
So I have a question. How do they find you? I mean, because fortunately I don't get people complaining to me that at least I know of, but how do they find that you're the person responsible for the science in the show?
So on Big Bang Theory and a little bit on Young Sheldon, my name was at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty easy to Google, and my email is up there. I shouldn't say, I'm going to get now 60,000 emails.
That's what you get. But I'm sorry.
But it turns out that's actually, it's not that, if people want to give feedback to a show, it turns out not to be that hard to find people's email addresses. And certainly, if you put things on Twitter, people might see it. I think people looked at social media a little more when it was new. I think there's just so much of it now. I think people look at it less.
Yeah.
But there are times that we've done something that I thought was really clever, and I wanted to see if anyone noticed it, and I would look on Twitter.
Well, and too, for me, coming from the fan side, part of how I got looped into Star Trek was that I was doing their public events like Star Trek Las Vegas and the cruise, and then I was brought in on Discovery. And so we had this dual role of me to be this voice of the science for Star Trek, as well as provide that behind the scenes. So I do have quite amount of fan connection. But I think one of the things that I've found helps the best is, one, I shut down when my seasons are airing. I'm not going to answer anything while that's on the air. And then when I do emerge, I come out with a nice little handy article or explanation in hand that's like, all right, guys, let's talk, because here it is. And that helps. Just getting ahead of it helps a lot.
And you're fully empowered to do that. You can, this is how you as scientists are encapsulating the things, that it's all your voice. And
I mean, to some extent, I feel like it's, one of the things I really try to convey, being in that role that I am and dancing between the fan side and the behind the scenes, is to really make it clear that I am not the writer, that this is not, I'm not taking credit for this stuff at all. I have provided a little bit of a scientific backbone that I am happy to use to teach some science, but I want to make it very clear that all of these incredibly talented showrunners and writers, they get the credit. And if, like David said, if that means that the hate mail gets directed at me and not them, then that's fine. I can take it. I've experienced worse. So yeah.
Isn't that part of being like defending your PhD or whatever you have to do as a scientist a little bit?
Yeah. This is again why there's so many parallels in the industries of figuring out whose name is going to go on the paper. It's like getting credits, like all the having to defend your work in front of the audience. Yeah, that's part of it.
Sorry, what were you going to say, David?
I think just one of the advantages of being an academic is never believing you're wrong.
Ha! Aha!
That's why I sucked at it.
Interesting. Are you purveyors of current? You mentioned science fiction, like novels and things. Are you yourselves consumers or purveyors of that at all, or science fiction television shows current that you don't work on, or films? Is that anything that you draw on or look to at all for inspiration or entertainment or anything?
All of the above.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge science fiction fan. And if there's something that you could find online or find in a show that would be inspiring, I try to draw ideas from everywhere that I experience. So I do a lot of science. I read a lot of science fiction and watch a lot of science fiction shows. So if those giving me ideas, that's good.
Yeah, I think for me, I did last year in 2020, I started doing a weekly thing where I would break down the science behind science fiction, and people could suggest episodes or movies and stuff. And we did that every week until I got exhausted. But it was, but that was great. And, like as Rhett, I'm just a huge sci-fi fan. And then the fact that like, I'm sort of pivoting my career from the support staff role into more of a writer role as well. That's just kind of important and part of the process to keep an ear to everything. And I love it. I'm just a sci-fi fan.
How about you, David?
One of the places I get my ideas from is I do get weekly emails on the updates from journals and things like that. And so if something is really nice, I'll file it in my brain. Some things I'll even write down on my computer, because usually what happens is they'll ask a question and it's so well defined that an answer just pops in your head, like this is clearly what they would be doing. But occasionally you're like, I have no idea. And so I have this list of ideas we haven't used that I sometimes look at.
Yeah. That I think I would do the same thing, but I have a right brain mind more than a left brain mind, because I'm, they're artistic.
What's kind of interesting is that if someone, probably the others think the same way, if I said to someone, come up with some science right now, it would just be a blank. But if they say they're on the roof at night doing something with each other, scientific, what is it? That extra constraint immediately pops things into your head, like bouncing lasers off the moon. And so it's the constraints that actually help this creative process, I think.
I think that boundaries, any kind of boundary, any kind of context always helps. If it's just like the amorphous void, then what are you going to do, right? Are there any shows or stories or like, are there any universes or franchises that exist that you have like a secret desire to help put your little stamp on or be a part of? Are there ones that you would be drawn to?
If I could get involved in the Marvel universe, that'd be, especially when I was growing up, we had comic books and there was not any great science, superhero movies or shows. They just didn't make them. I mean, there was the Hulk with Lou Ferrigno, which, I watched that. And then there was Superman, that was a good movie, but now the Marvel universe, especially, it's just, I was always a Marvel fan, and the movies are so, I don't know, I'm so in love.
All right, WonderCon. Anybody Marvel out there? How about you, David?
What always happens to me is if I get a suggestion, I always think of someone else that'd be perfect for that. So I'm always winding up referring these questions to my friends. I've been really lucky that there's couple shows that I was involved in did connect to the level of what I knew, and it was very broad. But usually when it gets very specific, I think of someone else to do it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. How about you, Erin?
Oh, so many. So for me, like my peak sort of just personal viewing pleasure is sci-fi comedy. That's like where I love. And so getting to meet and work a little bit with Mike McMahon on Lower Decks has been amazing. And like, unsurprisingly, we completely hit it off, because his other shows that he's worked on, like Rick and Morty and Solar Opposites, are hilarious for the way they integrate science in this really twisted, funny way. Sure. And then the other show that like I saw come on and I was just like, oh my God, I would literally like Faustian contract my way into this show is Avenue 5 by Armando Iannucci. And I was like, Armando Iannucci, I'm a huge fan of. He's a writer from Glasgow, and wrote Veep and Thick of It and all these other shows I'm a big fan of. And then he wrote a sci-fi series in space starring Hugh Laurie. And I was just like, God, that's so good. And they also, again, I'm fine sacrificing science if the comedy and the story works. And I think they do such a great job of that, where Yeah, technically the communication distance would be minutes, but the fact that they cut it down to about 25 seconds where people wait for the responses, it never stops being funny. So yeah, there's sci-fi comedy is my jam.
Well, good luck. We feel very lucky that you're with us now, Erin. Hope you stay with us because it's certainly helped us out a lot. Best of luck to you with MacGyver. Best of luck to you with Young Sheldon and any other Marvel universe, whatever. Hello. Thank you for taking the time to be here on the WonderCon panel. Thank you, WonderCon panelists, for tuning in. MacGyver and Young Sheldon can be seen weekly on CBS, on the regular terrestrial network, I suppose they're still calling it. And all the original series of the Star Trek universe, including Star Trek Discovery, which I'm a part of and which Erin's a part of, can be seen on Paramount Plus. Thank you so much. Thank you for helping spread the good word of science and helping ground these things for us, the actors, and for the audiences who take in your stories and inspires them. Much, much appreciated. And take good care. Stay safe.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
A lot of fun.